my fiancée said while we waited at the airport. I'm not certain about our future together. I canceled our honeymoon tickets before boarding, redirected my plans toward a startup idea, and months later, she saw my name in business news. I'm not certain about our future together. She said it so quietly that I almost thought I'd misheard her. But the look on her face told me I hadn't. We were sitting in Gate 14 of Denver International Airport, surrounded by honeymoon luggage, 2 boarding passes in my hand, and 3 years of what I believed was a solid, irreplaceable love story. Our flight to the Maldives was boarding in 47 minutes. Claire sat across from me in one of those plastic airport chairs, her carry-on between her feet, her engagement ring catching the overhead light every few seconds. She wasn't crying. That was the part that got me the most. 3 years of Sunday morning breakfasts and road trips and arguments that we always resolved before going to sleep. 3 years of watching her build her career in interior design while I built mine in tech consulting. 3 years of what I thought was genuine, committed partnership. And somewhere in those 3 years, she had started to feel uncertain. And she had waited until Gate 14 of Denver International Airport, 47 minutes before our honeymoon flight, to tell me. I thought about that timing a lot during that drive. It wasn't accidental. Nothing about Claire was ever accidental. She was one of the most deliberate people I had ever met in my life. Every word she said, she meant. Every decision she made, she had thought through, which meant she had chosen that moment on purpose. She had chosen the airport, the gate, the 47-minute window. The question was why. I didn't have an answer yet, but I had a feeling the answer was going to reframe a lot of the last 3 years. When I got home, the apartment felt like it was holding its breath. Her perfume was still in the air. Her toothbrush was still in the holder. Her half-packed toiletries bag was still on the bathroom counter because she'd planned to check those through, not carry them on. I sat down on the edge of the bed. I sat there for a long time. My phone buzzed. It was Owen, my best friend since college, someone who had been at our engagement dinner and had given a toast that made half the table cry. His text said, "Dude, Claire just called me. Are you okay?" I stared at the text. Then I typed back, "I'm fine. Can we talk tomorrow?" He replied immediately, "I'm coming over." I typed, "Owen, I'm fine." He typed, "I'm already in my car." 15 minutes later, he was sitting across from me at my kitchen table with 2 beers he'd grabbed from my fridge like he lived there. "Tell me everything," he said. So I did. He listened without interrupting, which was unusual for him. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and blew out a long breath. "She said it calmly?" he asked. "Completely calm," I said, like she'd been waiting to exhale. Owen was quiet for a moment. "Did she ever bring up doubts before this?" he asked. "No," I said. Then I paused. "Or if she did, I wasn't hearing them." He nodded slowly. "Did you ever notice anything off?" "The last few weeks." I thought about it honestly. "She was quieter than usual after the wedding planning got serious," I said. "I thought she was just stressed about the vendor negotiations." Owen set his beer down. "She told me something 2 months ago," he said carefully. I looked at him. "She called me and said she wasn't sure she was ready," he said. "I told her to talk to you. I told her she needed to bring it to you directly." I let that land. "She called you 2 months ago," I repeated. "Yeah. And she brought it to you first." He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "I told her to talk to you," he said again. 2 months ago," I said. "Yes." I picked up my beer. I took a long drink. "She had 2 months," I said quietly. "She chose Gate 14. Owen didn't have an answer for that. Neither did I. But something inside me shifted in that moment. Not toward anger, not toward grief, toward something colder and cleaner. Clarity. Claire came to the apartment 2 days later. She knocked, which she never used to do. I opened the door. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from one bad night. The kind that comes from carrying something heavy for a long time. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped back and let her in. We sat down in the living room. She had clearly prepared what she wanted to say because she started talking almost immediately, like she was afraid silence would give me the chance to say something she wasn't ready to hear. "I love you," she started. "I want you to know that first. That's not in question." "Okay," I said. "What I've been struggling with," she continued, "is whether love is enough." I waited. "I've been watching my parents," she said. "They loved each other. They really did. And they still ended up making each other miserable for 20 years before they finally divorced." "You've mentioned your parents before," I said. "I know, but it hit differently when I started thinking about it as our future and not just their past." I looked at her for a moment. "Claire," I said, "what specifically are you uncertain about?" She hesitated. Us, she said finally. The life we're building. I look at you, and I see someone who has their path completely locked in. Your consulting career, your savings plan, your 5-year roadmap. And I'm proud of you for that. I am. She paused. But sometimes it scares me. It scares you that I'm stable, I said. It scares me that you're certain, she corrected. Because I'm not. I'm still figuring out who I am and what I want. And sometimes I feel like I'm supposed to already have the answers just because we're engaged. I sat with that for a moment. If you weren't certain, I said carefully, why did you say yes when I proposed? She looked down at her hands, at the ring still on her finger. Because in that moment, she said, I wanted to say yes. I loved you, and I was happy, and saying yes felt like the right thing. But then the right thing started to feel wrong. I said, not wrong, she said. Just uncertain. I nodded. I understand the distinction, I said. Do you? She asked, and her voice had a little more edge in it now. Because I feel like you're being very calm and very measured, and I can't tell if that means you understand or if it means you've already decided something. I looked at her. I canceled the tickets at the gate, I said. That wasn't calm or measured. That was the only thing that made sense to me in that moment. I didn't want you to cancel the tickets, she said. I know, I said. But you also didn't want me to board the flight. She was quiet. So what do we do now, she asked. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. I think, I said slowly, that you need to figure out what you actually want. Not what you're afraid of. Not what your parents' marriage taught you to expect. What you actually want. And what do you want? She asked. I want someone who's certain, I said. Not perfect. Not fearless. Just certain. She looked like she was going to say something. Then she stopped. Then she took the ring off her finger and set it on the coffee table between us. I looked at it. I didn't pick it up. I'll get my things from the bathroom, she said. I nodded. She was gone in 20 minutes. I sat on the couch for a while after the door closed. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I was sitting with the quiet, clear weight of an ending, the kind that doesn't feel dramatic because it's too final to perform. I took a week off from work. I'm a tech consultant. I ran a small firm with 2 other partners, handling digital transformation projects for mid-sized companies, and I had enough banked goodwill with my partners to disappear for a week without the business collapsing. During that week, I did 3 things. I went for long runs every morning. I called my mother, who told me I was going to be okay in a tone that somehow made me actually believe it. And I opened an old notebook. The notebook had been sitting in my desk drawer for almost 2 years. It was full of rough notes, sketches, and half-finished plans for a startup idea I had been turning over in my head since roughly the beginning of my relationship with Claire. The idea was a platform, a B2B workflow automation tool specifically designed for small architecture and design firms. I had background in tech consulting. I had watched Claire navigate her interior design work for 3 years, and I had seen firsthand how many inefficiencies existed in the project management and client communication workflows of smaller creative firms. Big enterprise software was built for corporations. The tools most small design studios used were cobbled together from generic project management apps that weren't built for their workflow at all. My idea was something in between, purpose-built, intuitive, scalable enough to grow with a firm, but priced for a team of 5. I had shelved it because building a startup while planning a wedding while running a consulting firm had felt like too many things at once. But sitting in that quiet apartment with the ring still on the coffee table where Claire had left it, I picked up the notebook and read through every single page. And I knew this was what I was doing next. I called my consulting partner, Nate, the following Monday. Nate and I had been building our firm together for 4 years. He was meticulous, skeptical, and better at operations than anyone I had ever worked with. He was also the kind of person who would tell me when I was making a mistake without any diplomatic softening. I needed that. I want to talk to you about something, I said when he picked up. If this is about taking more time off, I'll support it, he said. Claire's situation or not, you've been running at 110% for 18 months. It's not about time off, I said. It's about something bigger. I heard him lean forward. Talk, he said. I walked him through the notebook. The idea, the market gap, the user research I had already loosely done just by watching Claire's workflow for 3 years, the monetization model, the potential enterprise expansion path. He was quiet for a long time when I finished. You've been sitting on this for 2 years, he said. Yes. Why now? I thought about how to answer that. Because the reason I was waiting for no longer exists, I said. Another long pause. Are you sure this is about the startup and not about needing something to channel the? Nate. I'm asking honestly. It's about the startup, I said. I'm not going to lie and say the timing is coincidental. But the idea is real and the market gap is real, and I've been sitting on it because I was scared of the risk. And now I've already taken the bigger risk, and it didn't kill me, I said. So, he laughed a little. All right, he said. Walk me through the financial projections again. From the top. I spent the next 3 months building. Not pitching, not fundraising, building. I hired a contract developer named Theo who had spent 6 years at a design software company and understood the workflow problem intimately. I brought in a UX designer named Brooke who had worked at 2 SaaS startups and immediately started tearing apart my wireframes in ways that made the product better. I worked 14-hour days, 6 days a week. I ran every morning. I called Owen on Sundays, and we talked about everything except Claire. I didn't think about Claire very much. That surprised me, honestly. I had expected the breakup to be a wound I'd be managing for months. Instead, it felt more like the removal of a splinter that had been embedded so gradually that I hadn't noticed the low-grade irritation it had been causing until it was gone. That's not to say it didn't hurt. It did. But the hurt was clean. It was the honest hurt of something real ending, not the jagged hurt of betrayal or cruelty. She had been uncertain, and she had finally said so. I had made a decision at gate 14, and the decision had been the right one. I held on to that. In month 2, I started quiet outreach to small design and architecture firms. Not a sales pitch, just conversations. Can I buy you 20 minutes of your time and ask about your workflow? I talked to 37 people in 6 weeks. Studio owners, project managers, senior designers. I took notes on everything. What I heard was almost uniformly the same. They were spending more time managing the business than doing the creative work. The tools they used were either too complex or too simple, and they would pay real money for something purpose-built. One woman who ran a mid-size architecture firm in Seattle, Hannah, sharp as a blade and twice as direct, looked at my early prototype demo and said, "If this does what you're showing me, I'll be your first paying customer and I'll send you 3 referrals on day 1. I almost called Owen from the parking lot. Instead, I texted Nate. He sent back 3 words, "Don't get sentimental." I laughed for the first time in weeks. Month 3, we had a beta product. Not perfect, full of rough edges and the kind of UI friction that makes power users grimace. But functional, genuinely useful, and built around the actual workflow patterns I had documented from 37 conversations. We launched a closed beta with 12 firms. Within 6 weeks, 9 of the 12 had upgraded from free to paid. The monthly revenue was small. We're talking low 5 figures, but the retention rate was extraordinary. People weren't just using the product. They were restructuring their workflows around it. That's when I knew we had something real. I reached out to investors in month 4. I had a deck, a demo, a retention story, and a clear explanation of the market gap. The first 3 meetings were polite and unproductive. The 4th was with a firm called Caldwell Ventures, a mid-tier VC operation that focused specifically on B2B SaaS with vertical market focus. The partner I met was a man named Mr. Caldwell himself, early 60s, white-haired, with the kind of economy of words that only comes from having sat through 10,000 pitches. He watched my demo in silence. He asked 4 questions, all of them precise. Then he looked at me and said, "Your retention numbers are the story. Everything else is just context." "I know," I said. "Why design and architecture specifically?" "Because I watched someone work in this space for 3 years and I knew the problem from the inside," I said. "Not from a research report. From proximity." He nodded slowly. "What happened to that person?" he asked. It was a strange question for an investor meeting. "They chose uncertainty," I said, "and I chose clarity." He looked at me for a long moment. "I like that," he said. "Let's talk terms." Month 5, Caldwell Ventures led a seed round. The number was enough to bring Nate fully on board, expand Theo's contract to full-time, hire 2 additional engineers, and set up a proper office instead of the spare bedroom I had been using as a war room for 4 months. The local business press picked it up. A regional tech publication ran a piece. Nothing viral, just a solid 800-word write-up about the funding round, the market opportunity, and the founding story. My name was in the headline. And that was the moment I found out about it from Owen. He called me on a Tuesday afternoon while I was in the middle of a product review session. "Did you see the article?" he asked. "I knew it was coming," I said. "Claire saw it," he said. I stopped. "She texted me this morning," Owen said. "She saw your name in the headline, and she read the whole piece." I was quiet. "What did she say?" I asked. "She said." He paused, and I could tell he was reading from his phone. she said. I had no idea he had this in him. I feel like I never really saw him. I sat down in my chair. I looked at the product roadmap on the whiteboard across the room. I thought about Gate 14. I thought about the notebook in my desk drawer. I thought about 37 conversations with designers and architects who had trusted me with their frustrations. I thought about Hannah in Seattle who had sent me 4 referrals, not just 3. I thought about Mr. Caldwell saying your retention numbers are the story. I thought about the 14-hour days and the Sunday calls with Owen and the runs every morning when my brain was still too full to think clearly. Owen, I said. Yeah. She saw me correctly. I said. I just hadn't shown this part of myself yet. He was quiet. Does that mean he started? No, I said. It doesn't mean anything about what comes next between her and me. It just means the airport was the right call. He didn't push it. That's what I've always liked about Owen. He knew when to stop. Claire reached out herself, 3 days after Owen's call. She sent a text that said, "Congratulations." I read the article. "I'm really proud of you, even if I don't have the right to say that anymore." I read it twice. Then I set the phone face down on my desk and went back to the product review. I didn't respond that day, not because I was being cold, but because I genuinely needed to decide what the right response was, and I wasn't going to rush it. That night, I went for a longer run than usual. I ran through the neighborhood near my new apartment. I had moved 2 months after the breakup, into a place that had no trace of the life we had been planning together, and I thought about what she'd written. "I'm really proud of you, even if I don't have the right to say that anymore." It was a generous message. It was honest, and it was generous, and it came from the part of Claire that I had genuinely loved. The part that, when she was at her best, was warm and self-aware and capable of real kindness. I thought about what I wanted to say back. I thought about it for the whole run. And when I got home and showered and sat down, I picked up my phone. I typed, "Thank you. I hope you're doing well." I sent it. Then I put the phone on the charger and went to bed. 3 weeks later, she replied. Just 2 words, "I am." And that was enough. That was, somehow, exactly enough. There's a conversation I had with Nate about 4 months into building the company, right around the time we were prepping for the investor meetings. We were working late, both of us tired, surrounded by coffee cups and printouts of user research. He looked up from his laptop at some point and said, "Do you ever think about how different things would be if you'd just gotten on the plane?" I thought about it honestly. "Yeah," I said. And I think I would have spent 2 weeks in the Maldives trying to convince myself that she hadn't meant what she said. I said. And then we would have come home, and it would have unraveled slowly instead of cleanly. "Slowly is worse," Nate said. "Slowly is always worse," I agreed. He nodded and went back to his laptop. "For what it's worth," he said without looking up, "I think Gate 14 saved you a lot of time." "It did," I said. "Good," he said. And that was the whole conversation. I want to talk about something that I don't think gets discussed enough in the way people process endings like this one. There's a version of this story, the easy version, where Claire is the villain. She waited too long. She chose the worst possible moment to drop this on me. She called Owen 2 months before she came to me. And on paper, all of those things are true. But they're not the whole truth. The whole truth is that Claire was a person who was genuinely afraid. She had watched her parents' marriage calcify into something loveless and exhausting. She had built up a picture in her head of what certain love looked like, and she wasn't sure she had it. She made a mess of the timing. God, did she make a mess of the timing? But the doubt itself wasn't manufactured. It wasn't cruelty. It was fear. And I can have compassion for that fear without letting it mean that she was right for me. Both of those things can be true at the same time. What I know is that the woman who is right for me will not be standing at Gate 14 in 47 minutes of uncertainty. She'll be standing there early, carry on already through security, asking me if I remembered the chargers. That's the version I'm holding out for. And I'm not in a hurry. The company is 8 months old as I write this. We have 41 paying clients. Monthly recurring revenue crossed 6 figures last month for the first time. Theo built out a feature set in the last sprint that our beta users called the best update we'd ever shipped. Brooke redesigned the onboarding flow, and our trial-to-paid conversion rate jumped by 22%. Mr. Caldwell called me last week to say that 2 of his portfolio companies had asked about us, and could we talk about strategic partnerships. Hannah in Seattle sent me a holiday card. An actual, physical, handwritten holiday card. It said, "You built exactly what you said you would." I don't say that about very many people. I put it on my desk where I can see it. Nate told me that was sentimental. I told him I didn't care. Owen asked me recently if I was happy. We were on one of our Sunday calls. He asked it the way he always asks things, Directly, no softening, no preamble. Are you happy? I thought about the question for a real moment. Not the polished, social media version of it. The actual question. Am I happy? I'm building something, I said. And I'm building it for the right reasons. That's not what I asked, Owen said. I know, I said. But it's the closest honest answer I have right now. He was quiet for a moment. I'll take it, he said. Thanks, I said. The startup stuff is genuinely impressive, by the way, he said. I know I don't say that enough. You literally never say it, I said. Hence enough, he said. I laughed. And sitting there on that Sunday call, laughing with my best friend about nothing important, with a business roadmap on my wall and a holiday card from a client on my desk and a morning run already logged, I thought, yes. Not a perfect happiness. Not the loud, Instagram filter kind. But the quiet, durable kind. The kind that doesn't need an audience. The kind that holds up when you're working late on a Tuesday and your eyes are tired and the problem in front of you is genuinely hard. That kind. The travel credit from the canceled Maldives tickets expired last month. I got an automated email from the airline telling me I had 72 hours to use or lose it. I stared at the email for a few minutes. Then I closed it. Then I opened it again. And then, on a quiet impulse, I booked myself a solo trip to Iceland for the following spring. Not a honeymoon. Not a consolation prize. Just a trip I had always wanted to take and had kept deferring because there was always a more practical use of a week. The booking confirmation came through and I looked at it for a moment. Then I forwarded it to Owen with no message. He replied 4 minutes later. You're really going by yourself? I typed back, yes. He replied, that's either the most confident thing you've ever done or the saddest. I typed, I genuinely think it's both. He replied, fair. I've thought a lot about the moment at gate 14. Not obsessively, not with bitterness, but with the kind of clear-eyed curiosity you have for moments that turn out to be pivots. I've thought about what would have happened if I had just absorbed what she said and said, okay, let's talk about it on the plane. I've thought about what it would have looked like if I had tried to fix it in real time, in that terminal, with 47 minutes on the clock and a boarding announcement about to start. I've thought about what kind of man I would have been if I had put those boarding passes back in my pocket and pretended I had the reserves to swallow that. And every time I think through those versions, I come back to the same conclusion. The man who canceled the tickets was a man who was finally listening to himself. Not to the sunk cost. Not to the fear of what people would say. Not to the $12,000 non-refundable honeymoon package. To himself. To the part of him that knew, had probably known for a while, that something wasn't right. That the certainty he'd thought they shared wasn't shared at all. That the rooftop proposal in Chicago had been a moment of genuine joy, but a moment of joy isn't the same as a foundation. I had confused the two. And gate 14 was where I found out. There's one more thing I want to say. It's about the startup. People have asked me, in interviews, in casual conversations, in meetings where I'm telling the founding story, whether I built the company out of spite, whether the whole thing was fueled by wanting to prove something. I understand why people ask that. The timeline is pretty neat, after all. Breakup at the airport, notebook off the shelf, company launched, articles written, ex-fiancée sees your name in the headline. It reads like a revenge arc. And I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some element of, I don't know, assertiveness in the decision to finally build the thing I'd been sitting on. But spite isn't a long enough fuel source. Spite gets you through the first week. It doesn't get you through month 3 at 2 in the morning when Theo calls to tell you that a critical feature has a bug and your biggest beta client needs it fixed before their Monday presentation. It doesn't get you through the investor meetings where you walk out empty-handed and have to recalibrate without losing momentum. It doesn't get you through the hiring decisions and the pricing debates and the product roadmap arguments and the 100 small crises that make up the actual daily reality of building something from nothing. What gets you through all of that is something sturdier. Conviction. The knowledge that the problem you're solving is real. That the people relying on your product are genuinely better off because it exists. That the work is worth the cost of the work. That's what gets you through. The notebook was always there. Gate 14 just cleared the path. My mother called me the week the funding round was announced. She'd seen the article. Someone had forwarded it to her, apparently, which meant it had spread further than I'd realized. She was quiet for a moment after I answered. I'm proud of you, she said. Thanks, Mom. Not just for the company, she said. I waited. For the airport, she said. I didn't say anything for a second. How did you know about the airport specifically? I asked. Owen told me, she said. Of course he did, I said. He was worried about you in the beginning, she said. He called me. I shook my head a little. He never told me that, I said. He wasn't supposed to, she said. He just wanted someone to check in on you. I sat with that. What did you tell him? I asked. I told him that you would be fine, she said. Because you've always been the kind of person who, when things fall apart, figures out what to build instead. I looked at the product roadmap on my wall. I looked at Hannah's holiday card. I looked at the Iceland booking confirmation I'd pinned next to the whiteboard. When did you know that about me? I asked. When you were 9, she said. You broke your model airplane, and instead of crying, you sat down and made a new one out of different parts. I laughed. I forgot about that, I said. I didn't, she said. The ring is still in a drawer somewhere. I should probably do something with it. Maybe I'll figure that out after Iceland. Or maybe I won't. It's not a wound anymore. It's just an object. A very expensive object that represents a version of a future that didn't fit the actual shape of 2 actual people. And that's okay. Futures are built, not assumed. I know that now in a way I didn't know before Gate 14. The company has a team of 9 full-time people now. We have an office. There's a coffee machine that Brooke insisted on buying that costs more per cup than I like to think about. Nate came in one morning last month, looked around the office, and said, "We should hire a COO." I looked at him. "That would technically be you," I said. He thought about it. "Yeah," he said. "Okay." That was our entire conversation about it. Some decisions are simple. I'm writing this from a coffee shop on a Thursday morning before a 10 o'clock product call. Outside the window, it's overcast, the kind of flat gray sky that makes the city look like a still frame. I've got my laptop, my notebook, a different notebook, a newer one, and a coffee. I'm not unhappy. I'm not performing happiness, either. I'm just here, in this city, with a company I built and a team I trust, and a trip to Iceland in 3 months that I'm genuinely looking forward to. There's no tidy moral to this story. There's no lesson that fits on a bumper sticker. There's just a guy who got honest news at the worst possible time and made the only decision that felt true to who he actually was. And then went home and opened a notebook and built something. That's the whole story. That's enough. Somewhere over the Atlantic, in about 3 months, I'll be looking at the horizon from a window seat I booked by myself. And I'll be thinking about none of this. I'll just be looking at the sky. And that, honestly, will be the most important part of all of it.